Hello and welcome to the Merc Astropod with me, Bren, and Rosalie here. We'll do some introductions before we start talking about the astrology of queerness. Happy Pride, everyone. So like I said, my name is Bren. I use they, them pronouns. I am a professional astrologer, card reader, and pole dance instructor. And my sun is in Pisces. My moon is in Aries. My rising's also Aries. And then my Mercury is Aquarius.
And what's up? I'm Rosalie. I am a apprentice now, officially. Body piercer, astrologer, and occultist. I have a Virgo sun and Mercury. I have a Sagittarius moon and an Aquarius rising. And yeah, we're here today to talk to you about queerness, which is a super fun topic. So a couple disclaimers before we get super, I guess, into it. Just to I don't know, go over what we'll be going over, because queerness is a very broad topic. So we'll be going over the impact of queerness in astrological history, mostly in recent years. I related a lot to, I don't know, you can't have queerness without punkness, you can't have punkness without queerness. So they're very intertwined culturally, and to see some of the patterns and the secret languages that people would use is just really interesting. So we'll go into that a little bit, and then client etiquette as well. So if you are a practicing astrologer, if you plan on being a practicing astrologer, even if you're just an ally or somebody who's just new to the idea of queerness and the LGBTQ plus community, we kind of just go over how to be trauma informed, low-key.
Yeah, and communicate with your clients in an ethical and compassionate way, in a way that will make them feel included in the reading and heard and seen, which is important for any client work.
1,000%. And then we'll go through some queer markers in the charts, as well as what we heard back as feedback during the Denver Astrology Group meetup, and what we kind of chatted about as people. We should have used Elton John's chart or something as an example. We didn't use example charts. We just did
we talked about our own. We did talk about our own charts. I do identify as transgender. Rosalie identifies as non-binary. We have other self-identifying queer people in the audience. In fact, I think everyone who came did identify as some sort of queerness. But.
One of the newer members that I spoke to at the end that was sitting over on the right was actually an ally, and she was like, "Is it okay that I'm actually here?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, it's okay that you're here."
If you're not queer, you should definitely be here, almost even more so, because this information is so important to, again, respect, especially in the climate that we're in, where there's a lot of disrespect and just a lot of unsurety, just stepping around eggshells to talk about these things that should be still spoken about.
And then we'll talk about some timing techniques used to do very trans or LGBTQIA plus identifying kind of time periods, like name changes, coming out to family, to work. If you're living on a certain we don't go through eschatography lines or things like that, but if you're living in a certain location and around a certain amount of people, and you go through a new move and you want to see what transits are kind of coming up your way, things like that. We go through a lot of just, I guess, important times. Not everything is a queer marker. It's very subjective. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
And then we'll go over a little bit, before we dive too deep into all of that, how it is the tail end of Gemini season right now.
Yes, absolutely. We can even dive into that right now. So happy Gemini season. I've definitely experienced a lot of duality within this Gemini season. A lot of things, doing things twice or seeing things show up more than once. To repeat those things. But anyway, the tarot card that's associated with Gemini is the Lover's card. And this is a really cool, this is the it's number 6 within the major arcana. It's actually technically the 7th card, I suppose, within the major arcana.
And the Fool.
Yes, the Fool, if you obviously
Zero.
include 0. So the Lovers to me symbolizes a choice. If we're going to be in partnership with someone, we have to make a choice and compromise within some sort of realms within that. So choosing to be with someone, what choices you have to then make to continue that partnership, and vice versa. And I love the Lover's card for pride and for queerness in general, because love is love. And
I agree.
I think that's so powerful.
I agree 100% and wholeheartedly. I feel like it's just a lot about, balanced decision making, and what is acceptable from all points of view, not just your own. And that's what I really love about the Lover's card. personally, and about Gemini in general, about the overarching Gemini themes. When we dive into the individual segments of Gemini, it does also speak to a lot of queerness, which is a lot of repression and not fun things, like the Lord of interference, the Lord of despair and cruelty, and then the Lord of ruin in the last 3 decades as major arcana or minor arcana card titles. So if you're unfamiliar, we've explained this a couple times, so I'm going to be brief with it. You can look back to past podcasts to kind of get a more deep dive into it, because we had a whole thing going over the tarot of astrology. But it's essentially just you have the first 10 degrees of Gemini is associated with the 8 of Swords because it's mutable air, and then you have the 9 of Swords as the middle 10 degrees. Well, it's 0 to 9 degrees, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and then 10 degrees to 19 minutes, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and then 20 degrees to 29 minutes, 59 seconds, so all that jazz. So
Yeah.
but in doing that, you get a deeper nuanced flavor to Gemini, which comes from dealing with, the difficulties between self-victimization and self-acceptance, anxiety versus hope, failure versus survival, is these kinds of tougher life decisions that need true balance, that need true harmony, that need true unity to get through and to get by with, I guess.
Well, and a strength of Gemini, it's a very intellectual sign. Definitely can be empowering thing for us, but also with like associating that Gemini energy with those decans, those 8, 9, and 10 of Swords. It's a lot of that mental processing and the problem solving that comes within that too, of like, okay, what's the balance of overthinking something versus like making a decision or taking action. That's very Gemini, which is just lots of chaotic thought and energetic energy. Yeah.
1,000%. And speaking of chaotic energetic energy, we held this Denver Astrology Group meetup the exact day of the chaotic Saturn square Jupiter as well as Mars square Uranus. So both of those energies were in the morning, and we had it later in the afternoon, but still reverberating as their major planetary transits. So it was like an interesting thing to kind of deal with, and we even talked about that a little bit as like a group and heard some interesting stories. I'm assuming you're going to make me talk about mine.
We will definitely talk about that. So yeah, we are adding this new section to our podcast, which is like just investigating the Astro Weather, which is just especially important this year, especially 2025, where so many things are happening for us, with Neptune entering Aries, Saturn entering Aries, and then Uranus is about to move into Gemini, and then we have all these squares telling stories that have been revealing themselves through the last few years, and obviously decades and several centuries, if we're looking at even bigger picture things there. So a few things that we just want to mention. We'll start with Saturn entering Aries, which was not that long ago. That was on May 24th, 2025, and so we're moving out of that Piscean dreamy Saturn energy, trying to put boundaries on that dreaminess structure, into the more fiery Aries, which is about go-getter energy, and also taking into consideration that Saturn does not love being in the sign of Aries. Saturn is the planet of discipline, the planet of structure and time, whereas Aries is more like immediate gratification, go now. And Rosalie's probably laughing too, because Saturn in Aries is a placement that Rosalie has. So congratulations on entering your Saturn return.
It's brief. It's just a little taste, and then I get a break, and then it doesn't actually hit exact until 2026 for me, like middle to late 2026. I don't remember exactly when. I have it written down somewhere.
I'm a big believer that your Saturn return starts when it enters the sign.
Oh no, I am too, and it has very much. Hi, hello, I'm a new tattoo apprentice. That's like a now title that I solidified, and it's not just maybe someday one day. It's I'm doing this. It's happening. You're on my calendar. I've got other people on my calendars. Like,
you need a tattoo piercing.
Yes, but anyway,
this beautiful human.
I think it's living with it natally. It is a lot like just being restricted in your motivations. It's like Aries burnout, but like to the max. It's like when you're Aries burned out, you just get excessive executive dysfunction on wanting the things that you want to do, the things that you want to complete, the things that you want to go out and accomplish. I feel like a lot of the mundane astrology will feel like that to a lot of the general public, especially during Saturn retrogrades through Aries, where it just feels like you're just getting stuck in the mud, where like it could be physical roadblocks depending on like your own natal chart, like things in your immediate life that are like keeping you from doing your passions. It could just be mental illness, some internal problems. It could just be a lack of passion and trying to find those passions again, or experiment in new ways that seem sustainable and long-term to you, and that you don't get burnt out from easily. Mm-hmm. So
essentially, Saturn entering Aries is a new energy. It's a new lesson that Saturn wants us to learn. So if you have cardinal energy, for sure, definitely now's the time to pay attention to that.
Well, specifically with also Jupiter entering into Cancer, another cardinal sign, which is our next little thing that we talked about.
Well, and also before we do that too, we did just to also, Neptune also entered Aries, so Saturn also being there
we didn't even mention
that. This was last time. This because Neptune had already been in Aries the last time, but we also, nothing's a monolith within astrology, so we have to take into consideration what other relationships are happening during.
It's getting so close to Neptune. It doesn't get conjunct this time that Saturn's in Aries, but
it gets close and then it like does a little retrograde thing, but it will hit next year, right?
It definitely hits next year for sure on its pass through.
So
I think it actually retrogrades over Neptune, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that though.
Yeah, we'll see more as that reveals itself to you. Very Neptunian of us to be like, what is going to happen? Like having kind of a fog of like, what will that even be?
But cardinal energies, I feel like are getting like that new flavor of a planet for the first time, with the outer, more social planets of Jupiter and Saturn entering into their signs. And then that also just feels even more gross to like the fixed signs who have been getting well, we kind of their ass handed to them since Pluto entered Aquarius.
So Pluto entered Aquarius last year permanently, right? Or was it
it's permanent
now.
Early this year.
So with all of these outer planets that take a long time to change signs, entering into new signs, we're really in a new era, and that's why it's so exciting to be paying attention
Uranus
to the astrology.
is the last one. Uranus is,
and that's happening next month,
July 7th.
So we're really entering this new era.
After that, every single outer planet from Jupiter out till Pluto is entering a new sign this year. Oh my fucking God. That's insane to think about.
It really is. So, and that does not happen often
at
all. So
that is
very rare.
I just put that together. But anyway, I want to talk about Jupiter and Cancer, though, if you'll let me, please. Okay, so I feel like this is extreme gentle parenting, whether that be internally, whether that be externally, but I feel like it's also extreme boundary setting, because just as much as Cancer can be the gentle nurturer, it can be the like harsh bitch at the same time.
He's got the claws.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. Well, think of how the moon is consistently inconsistent. I see this every single time I talk to a Cancer or talk about Cancer. To really solidify it in people's heads, it's ruled by the moon, which changes every 2.5 days, the sign that it's in. It is the fastest moving celestial orb in our solar system. It influences our immediate like surroundings just so heavily and so quickly and so adaptively, but it changes the exact same way every 28.5 days or 28 I think 29.5 days, something like that. The moon is just so fluctuating, and I feel like people forget that Cancer is ruled by that, and that Cancer fluctuates just as much as the moon does. Whether that be positive or negative depends on the Cancer placements and depends on everything, but Jupiter being exalted there, it loves that kind of energy, so it's all about like standing up for like your autonomy, your freedom, your sense of justice, your philosophies in life, which we need in this day and age.
Yeah. That's so interesting, too.
But on a broader, mundane sense, it's on everybody's political radar. So regardless of your beliefs, your philosophies, they're going to feel like you need to defend them with every fiber of your being. Like they're your baby.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and if we are also taking into consideration where Jupiter has been this last year, which has been Gemini, a place where it doesn't really enjoy a lot of, mental energy in its, detriment. Jinxies. That was cute.
I was trying to help.
No, I love that. I sometimes get detriment and fall mixed up, but anyway, I'm wondering if you all have been feeling a little bit of a relief. I felt the Jupiter enter Cancer, even though there's all these other tense aspects happening around the same time. I've definitely felt the relief of Jupiter being in Cancer as opposed to Gemini.
I get it. No, for sure.
And, it depends on where it is in
I
your
feel like
chart
I've been
as well.
reminded a lot by the people around me to be kinder to myself, like more aggressively.
Born nurturing. That's very Cancerian. That makes sense.
No, I mean, you're a part of that too, or you'll be like, just stop talking negative about that, you know? Like, you're great. Like, shut up. You give yourself more, or not enough credit kind of jazz.
Yeah.
Which I get it. I feel like we all do. And, like, I feel like all artists hate their own art too, so it's even, like, worse in a permanent art industry.
Well, yeah, we also want to talk about, like we were talking about earlier, Mars, Leo square, Uranus, Taurus.
All the fixed sign drama.
Yes. And Jupiter square Saturn. So Jupiter, Cancer square, Saturn, Aries.
Yeah, so in those two planets shifting into those signs, they square each other because they're both cardinal signs. So cardinal signs are getting a square, and then fixed signs are also getting a square simultaneously. And I say fixed signs have been kind of like getting handed to them since the beginning of this year, just because there's been so many fixed sign transits. Like Uranus is still at the tail end of Taurus, so it's able to hit technically a bi-sign square with Pluto. So technically this Pluto-Mars-Uranus situation is like a very loose T-square, in my opinion. This T-square between Mars and Pluto has been like teasing us the entire like Mars retrograde period that we had when it entered early Leo in November of last year, went back into Cancer for a little bit, and is now just finishing up. It just finished the other day. It's journey through Leo land and is now in Virgo finally.
Yeah, so as of 2 a.m. this morning, Mars is finally in Virgo, which feels great after like...
I don't feel it yet.
You don't feel it?
Maybe it was just a super technical analysis of the muscle work that I was like...
You're literally caring for your body. You literally spent your time today. So that's
I just
really
got like
powerful.
assist stretched for like 70 minutes, and it was the most beautiful thing in all of existence.
Yeah. And what I'm seeing for this Mars Virgo is, because we also have to take into consideration the larger context of what's going on astrologically, that South Node is also there. So with
The eclipses,
Mars severing, well, we'll talk about that in a second too, but like the energy is like Mars severing, and then the South Node also releasing. The time is going to be really about like, what do we need to release in that Virgo sector of our chart and really sever and permanently end or fight for, you know, are we going to be fighting for better, healthier habits or things like that? Where are we putting our energy? That's going to be a big theme. And like you were talking just a moment ago about the eclipses, we're right in the midway point right now with the, squares. I was going to go more into that too. I really wanted to talk too about like Saturn. When was the Saturn-Jupiter story? Because now we're in a square, so now they're in this relationship. But remember when they were in a conjunction that was in 2020, right? So there was this big storyline about like COVID and global, policies and lots of shifts. So now we're at that tension point 5 years later. Okay, where are we now? What is that story? How is that story evolving? We really want to make sure we take that into consideration as we see how the stories play out.
Because they'll get to that opposition in the next 5 years after that, and there'll be another check-in point of another tension-building opposition. We'll get the trying along the way, sure, but that story and that cycle is very telling to a lot of history. So following that cycle is very beautiful. And you mentioned that it's a halfway point between those eclipses,
yes,
which is just such a beautiful, well, just interpretively, that eclipse story is telling us to let go of a different dynamic than what Jupiter and Saturn is like influencing us on a broader social scale to really like impact and inform for our relationship with each other. I feel like is really what is being challenged, and how we treat each other as humans.
And without going into it too much, just significant events that are going on globally right now when these tense aspects have been happening is mass protests like King's Day. It was also President Trump's birthday. So there's a lot of feelings that these things are bringing up for everyone, no matter how you're involved, like within
Zane
sides,
said something about that. I forget what it was. It happened on like his... I think it's his Mars return or something. Or Mars on his ascendant, maybe? Because his ascendant is super late, 29-degree Virgo. So I think this Mars square Uranus is happening like on his ascendant, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So lots of things going on globally to pay attention to, lots of exciting movement.
It's just funny that like we're talking about how Jupiter Saturn just speaks to mass protests, and the person that's getting mass protested has this square happening on his ascendant.
And again, if we're talking about the entire story, when conjunction happened back in 2020, he was president, and there was a lot of conflict regarding how he was like handling the COVID epidemic.
How it was like talking about it too and releasing information about it because he was like, oh, it's fine, it's like not that big of a deal, and it was like a huge deal. It was like killing people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, all that's to say, there's a lot going on astrologically, and definitely stay tuned for next month too, because we're going to be talking more about Uranus in depth, and
I'm excited. I have been going into, I like subdivided the boomer generation by Uranus. I'm going to make a TikTok/Instagram video about it, so we'll get more into it. But I divided them by sub-generation via Uranus's chunk of that generation. So we're like where Uranus is in there. So yeah, I am very excited for it. But to get back to, do you have anything? Sorry,
I think we're good with the astro updates. Yeah, the eclipse stuff is fine. Basically, we're halfway between like the eclipse earlier this year and the eclipse that will be happening next year. So this is a good middle point, and especially with those nodes, the North Node being in Pisces right now, South Node in Virgo, and now we're in this kind of like Sagittarius Gemini energy. We're getting a lot of like crossover T-square energy.
No, 1,000%. So to get into the queer history of it all, then
yes, let's go into queerness.
Just jumping into like what we talked about in the presentation. I just gave a really brief, hey, here's some like cool terms and like slang usage from these time periods. So pre-20th century overt queerness was very socially dangerous, so many queer practitioners used metaphors to express non-normative experiences or unusual affections or Venusian mysteries, if you will. And I just thought that was really like funky to like, I mean, you can kind of see it in like the way that people would write back in even Shakespeare's time, the way that Shakespeare talks about the stars and talks about the planets and the movements. Like you can tell he's low-key talking about like a little fruity jester or whatever. And then there's also just great modern day astrologers such as Chinny Nicholas, Alice Sparkley Cat. Demetra George is really great at including inclusive language in a lot of her texts and breaking down historical roots to super inclusive language to be like, Saturn's feminine, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting that you're bringing up femininity as well versus masculinity. That language in itself is something that is
being so broken apart.
It's like, being shifted.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
During this conversation, so we're going to be using maybe terms. You're going to talk about this a little bit too, but terms like yin versus yang energy rather than feminine versus masculine, just because it's a little more inclusive and. Yeah.
I personally like active versus passive the best. That's the like pairing that I personally choose. I have like a little table here that we'll throw up that just kind of goes over the different options that you can use, but we'll get into that with like clientele etiquette. I guess it's really just using gender neutral language as being very important because polarity exists in astrology, and it's the polarity that's not necessarily opposite. It's polarity. They pull and push in opposite directions. They're not necessarily, I mean, they can be two halves of the same whole. They could be two extremes, like polar opposites, kind of jazz, like positive and negative. But you need a positive and negative charge to like run a battery, kind of jazz.
Well, and when we're talking about a human being, there's so many complex energies that go into one person. There are passive energies and there are active energies, and different those energies will be activated differently depending on transits and what's going on in that native's life. So to be more inclusive and more open-minded about one human can be more than just masculine or just feminine is really important to getting a whole picture within a client reading.
Oh, 100%. And it's always, always, always important to always ask, never assume anything. Whether that be your client's pronouns, your client's sexual history, your client's relationship status. Because a lot of times people want to be curious about their love life or synastry readings. You should never assume just because they're maybe an AFAB presenting person or an AMAB presenting person that they're going to have heteronormative preferences, and it's also like, are you gonna really be sitting there talking about your client's sex life with them? No, it's mostly
you
like
might.
Maybe
It depends on your client.
It does depend on your client,
but it does really depend on what your client desires too. And I like that you're asking for clarification too, because like if a client's asking you about love life and you're going off on a diatribe about something, they're like, oh, I'm actually not even monogamous. Why are you saying my one true love is going to be around the corner like tomorrow? You know what I mean? You have to have context to what also the client is wanting to get out of the reading to inform yourself so you know how to lead that.
So ask and never assume anything. And that should just be baseline standard for anything in an astrological reading. That should be just client etiquette always. I mean, yeah, you can assume certain things based on their natal chart, but they're archetypal expressions. You can't see a moon in Capricorn and just assume that somebody has an absent mother figure. You know, you can't just like maybe it's a very present mother figure, but they were really strict the entire time, so they felt oppressed by that very over nurturing mother figure, in a sense.
You can't forget that astrology is an archetypal language. It's not always this. Yeah.
And then also, it will just incorporate context. You know, don't isolate planets from lived experience. Context in astrology, it plays such a huge role in how everything is playing out all in tandem with each other. Because every planet is flowing in and out with other energies. So to see which one has the dominant reign at certain areas of somebody's certain life, it's just really important to dissect all of it, to be like, okay, well, you're in a Mars perfected year and you're getting a Mars return at the same time. Yeah, it makes sense that because Mars is in your 12th house, you're going through these like severances of hidden identities you didn't even realize existed in your psyche, you know, and breaking down those kinds of things in order to understand yourself a lot more deeply and a lot more like fully as a human. Because you're just like double impacted by Mars. I think Chris says it a lot on his podcast, especially with like transit stuff. If you see something once in astrology, it might manifest. If you see something twice in astrology, it's a little bit more likely to manifest. If you see something emphasized 3 to 4 times in astrology, it's almost very like prevalent in your life, all around you.
Just don't be afraid to be honest and ask what you need of your client to get to where they need to be. Like, it's okay to ask questions and be open. I'm talking mostly to allies, you know. I feel like because there's so much sensitivity when it comes to queerness, a lot of people can like try to, you know, dance around the topic or things like that, but it's always okay to just like ask, you know, within, you know, use your discretion with that and discernment, obviously. But
being trauma informed just really means like being inclusive in your language, as well as not assuming things right off the bat. Also just avoid invasive phrasing too. Don't like be asking about somebody's sexuality if they're not willing to like, if they're not asking about their relationship, don't bring it up. You know,
right.
If they're not talking about their home life, don't like bring up how you might see like a bad parent relationship in the chart, you know. Or sometimes somebody will ask a question to me and I'll follow it up with a question about their family to be like, okay, well, tell me about your home life. You know, if you want me to answer this question, like I need a little bit more context of like how you've lived your existence thus far to see how these archetypes are manifesting. So like, I don't know, somebody with the moon in Taurus in the 4th house could have grown up farming, or they could have grown up having like the strictest military parents known to mankind, where they live in constant fear and anxiety their entire life, you know?
Yeah. So just remember too that not every queer person's the same. So one trigger for someone might be a different trigger for someone else. Queer markers within the astrology chart. So again, huge disclaimer, just because you might have one of these placements does not automatically make you queer. It's just a potential indicator, because a big thing that we talked about at our meetup too, that Demetra George also talks about, is that it really depends also on the context of the culture that native is also living in. So, you know, queerness might be totally normal in one culture, whereas like another one it's completely forbidden. So looking at those charts, you'd not be doing yourself a service if you were looking at them completely the same. They're not the same because they're showing up differently within cultural context. So
1,000%.
That's that disclaimer. But from there, we want to talk a lot about Venus and Mars, especially. These are planets that you'll want to look to just, you know, Venus is the planet of relationships. It's the planet of love, things like that. So not only that, but we're also going to look at, we're looking at Venus, and then we're also looking at the higher octave of Venus, which is Neptune. You can look at that with also that generational, societal kind of understanding of love as well within the context of the chart. And then also we're going to look at Mars, which is the planet of action, drive, your desires, and sex as well. And also the higher octave of that, which is Pluto. So some things, another planet that we'll want to look at too is like Mercury, our favorite, obviously, our favorite buddy Hermes, because in astrology, Mercury is the only planet that is known as to be like hermaphroditic or
1000%.
without gender or going both sides or something in between.
It's both diurnal and nocturnal. It's both polarities. It's both passive and active. It's
Sounds
all
really queer.
Dry, wet, dry, wet, hot, and cold. All 4 elemental qualities that can be assigned to either a planet or a sign. Usually things just have 2. Mercury has all 4.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really talk about this in the meetup, but do you feel like maybe highly mercurial people could even be more likely to be queer just because they're very mercurial and they're very much like...
I feel like more often than not, highly mercurial people just don't like the extremity of life. They believe that life it's a grayscale that is fluid. You can be a light gray one day and you can be pitch black the next, you know? You can be an eggshell white 1 month and then spend years of your life playing perfect neutral gray, you know? And then there's also warm tone grays and cool tone grays. So there's even like more options in that too if you add color into the mix, and it's not just from black to white, but it's the entire scale of like perception, you know? So I feel like mercurial people are just more inclined to understand that a little bit more naturally, especially with Pluto in Sagittarius, just giving that philosophical generational push of acceptance, low-key, of seeing things from the other side, of finding your passions and the things that empower you to live a better existence. That could just be the fact that mine's in my 11th house and I'm saying that, but
Sure.
I feel like Gen Z very often shares that kind of like stereotype and that archetype of like vocalizing oppression at the very least, standing out for what's wrong, being just philosophical in general. It's a Jupiterian ruled sign. It's all about like that active. This is what I love about using active and passive, because like Sagittarius is active Jupiter ruled, Pisces is passive Jupiter ruled. So you get 2 flavors of that same planet, you know, expressing itself in different ways. And I feel like in that active Jupiterian role, you get that freedom, that act of creating freedom. Whereas like when Pisces land, it's a little bit more passive. It's like the concept of freedom and a boundless love and boundless expression of compassion towards like your human equal parts, stuff like that. That's what I love about Jupiter. So Jupiter moving into Cancer ties back in, to things like that. But
For sure. Yeah. Cool. Just a thought that I had. Thank you for expanding on that. So going into certain specific aspects that you can see perhaps in a chart of queer people is Saturn making an aspect to any of those personal planets like Venus or Mars especially, because Saturn is that planet of restriction, right? And if we have the planet of restriction making a relationship with Venus, for example, a planet of love, things like that, you know, we're having a restriction of some kind on that energy. So that could indicate a withholding of something. You know, a lot of queer people, for example, feel like they need to be closeted because they don't feel safe. So that could be Saturn's influence within the chart, making that aspect to, and these are specifically tense aspects, you know, conjunctions, squares, oppositions, but it definitely could be in more pleasant aspects as well.
I don't know. Trines and water signs, I still fucking hate. So, I don't know, sue me. I think it's a little bit too much harmony. I think it's a little bit too much ease. It's a slippery slope that often gets me slammed into a wall head first that I do not really appreciate.
So funny.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Another planet that is super important that we look at is Uranus. Obviously, Uranus is the wild card, right? So to be queer is to be different, right? And that literally is very Uranian. So we're going to want to also look at, is Uranus making, like, is it prominent in your chart? Is it making certain aspects to your love planets or how you interact with life? Or is it in the 7th house rule, or is it in the 7th house, or is it interacting with the 7th house ruler in some kind of way? Because that can indicate, again, only in societies where queerness is not the norm, which is most societies, but, you know,
being like repressed in some sort of or even like just the fact that
different
being different, but also Uranus represents revolution on a lot of senses, and was the queer movement in our culture today not started with a riot,
literally,
you know?
a revolution in itself. Absolutely.
So I think it's just things to consider with that, and then in the same kind of like modern, I guess, lens, you also get Aquarian nature being really represented with queerness as well. I think that comes 1,000% from Saturn, because it's active Saturn energy, which is future thinking, forward thinking. It's about taking the unknown and making it known. And I feel like it's about like being a pariah, being like a social outlier, being out against the norm, being quirky is like the Aquarius stereotype, I guess. I think it's more of like a mad scientist realm. You just like to try things out every once in a while, and everybody thinks you're weird because you like to like test out life because you only get one fucking shot. Might as well see what you like and what you don't like, you know?
Definitely.
I don't know, that's my 2 cents as an Aquarius rising and with Jupiter there as well, so. But.
Absolutely.
Anyway, point is, I think that both Aquarius and Uranus have a big queer influence on people's charts, you know, and in their impact into, I guess, existence.
Absolutely. Moving on, we also have, house emphasis. So we're going to want to look at a lot of the relational houses. So we would look at the 5th house for hookups or dating life, things like that. 7th house is partnership, marriage, relationships. You also talked about the 8th and 12th house, which I thought was really awesome.
I think the 11th house too, yeah. 8th house and 12th house, just for, again, cultural context, huge disclaimer, depending on the society that you were brought up into and the culture in which you were raised into, this might be completely dependent and completely variable. But it just talks about how, like, sometimes the intense harboring and, like, suppression of those things can be found with 8th or 12th house placements, or heavy 8th or 12th house emphasis in a chart. You know, like, I'm an 8th houser with an Aquarius rising. Like, those are 2 things that we're talking about as queerness. And my thing is, like, I kind of always knew that I was attracted to any gender. It really didn't matter, and that gender was also kind of, like, a stupid social norm, because I was always, like, just a tomboy going around breaking gender stereotypes anyway.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
But I didn't realize it as such. Oh, she's gonna put her paws out. You're blessed.
I am so blessed. I've got
just
the
little beans.
I love that. Happy Pride.
But yeah, Bren also brought up a great point about the 12th and the 8th house, about being with annual perfected years, those like activated as like usually transformation points where you like resolve those kinds of issues, or they become easier as you hit them through annual progressions. Which, do you mind actually explaining to our potential beginner viewers what an annual perfection is?
Yes, I would love to.
As we talk about the houses, and then you can go into the 5th and 11th.
I would love that. So annual perfections is a Hellenistic astrology, ancient astrology technique in which every year of your life is correlated with a certain house within your chart. So,
and this technique does utilize whole sign houses and just whole sign houses. So if you do usually look at your chart in like a Placidus system, you can still apply what you learned from annual perfections to a Placidus chart, but you have to use whole sign houses in order to calculate your annual perfections, just because that's a technique that it was. Sorry, that was a question at the meetup, so I just wanted to talk about that real quick.
Well, and for the video, you'll be able to pull up the perfection wheel, so you can look at where, like, how old are you? You'll find where that is on your chart. And then whatever the age it's saying, it'll show you a house. So every 29-year-old, for example, is always going to be in a 6th house perfection year, because that's how it goes. But we're all going to be experiencing it differently because we all have different energies within that 6th house.
Oh, yeah, because 18 and 30 are 7th house perfected years.
Yes. So, so if you want to know more about perfections, look at how old you are in the chart, see what house is ruling that, see what other see what planet is ruling that house, I should say, see what other planets are maybe in that house, and that can give you an indicator of the themes that are going to be playing out within your year ahead.
So just for a quick summarization and clarification, it's just the same for everybody per year, to house that it lines up with, per age to what house it lines up with. But it's different for you depending on your rising sign of what that house is flavored by zodiacally or planetarily.
Yes.
Sorry, continue.
Yes, that was a great explanation. I really like that. So yeah, 5th, 7th house is going to be really about like how you're interacting with the relationships. But it also, you know, literally it could show up in your first. Again, like if your gender identity is different, or you know, that's how you're presenting yourself, it definitely can show up in the first house. There's so many, it just depends on what queerness are you looking for. Are you looking for the sexuality aspect? Are you looking for gender identity? These are all things to take into consideration.
Are you looking for queerness. How you get involved in your queer community, so you instead turn to the 10th or 11th house, you know?
Yes.
Even the 9th house for studying and getting up to date on queer philosophy, queer history, queer like knowledge in general. I really like the next point, and you brought it up really well with your own chart. You have every single personal planet in the opposite. So every planet is assigned a polarity, and every zodiac sign is assigned a polarity. Bren's all are opposite. So
all my quote unquote masculine signs are in feminine or planets, or I should say that again. All my quote unquote masculine planets are in feminine signs, and all my feminine signs are in masculine planets.
Feminine planets are in masculine signs. You did the same thing but backwards.
Thank you for clarifying. At least someone's paying attention here. So, and these are personal
Mars
planets.
is in Virgo now. It's my time to shine.
Let's get specific details.
I'll catch myself on all of my own mistakes from now on. I once introduced myself as an Aquarius moon and Sagittarius rising, and I don't think anybody caught it. I didn't mention it at all. It's just in one of our podcasts forever now.
Wait, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, that's messed up. No, maybe you were showing up as
I think we mentioned it, like, later in the podcast, but I was like, nobody's going to listen this far into it to, like, make the connection, but anyway.
Sure. Yeah. So just thinking about, like, again, how our society even defines masculine versus feminine, again, passive versus active. So in a lot of ways, like, growing up, I was like, you know, I didn't want that feminine identity that was pushed on me. I was like, well, why do I have to follow these rules when my baby brother has more right to do more masculine things? Like, I remember very viscerally, like, peeing standing up, even though that's actually, like, an anatomy thing. But, like, I was always, like, fighting, like, why...
I think you're fighting the anatomy of it all.
Yeah, why do certain people have certain rights and other people don't, just because of their genitals? It didn't make sense to me growing up. So just balancing that, like, feminine, masculine...
I'd just be jumping down window wells to be catching some toads and some snakes. I'd be helping my dad with the trucks and the garage. I'd be driving some motorcycles. I'd be spitting out sunflower seeds at the baseball games while taking fucking score sheets about them. Yeah. That's just the kind of kid that I was.
Batty kid. Yeah.
I think it's just the Aquarius rising. I think it's the unconventionality. Because Aquarius is fixed air. It is... let me take what you think about me and prove it completely wrong all of the time. I love telling people that I was a varsity cheerleader in high school.
Yeah.
That's my favorite, because they look at me and they're like, you? What?
I mean, yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, girls in spandex that I get to just put my hand on their ass. Consensually.
It makes sense. It checks out.
I mean, I wouldn't, like, abuse that, and I wasn't... I should go stand in a fucking corner.
I think we get you. We catch
yeah,
you.
okay.
Well, and from there, we'll talk about, you know, also mutability and water. Yeah.
Well, but I'm just going to say I have very heavy mutable placements. I have my moon and my sun and my Mercury all in mutable signs, which isn't, like, the most that there could be. But on top of that, like, I need to fight violently against conformity, kind of like part of the Aquarius nature. It's mixed with that mutability on top of that. And Zane was a great example of this too with the Pisces rising. Having mutable signs on the ascendant or on the angles means that there's an emphasis to mutable energy. Regardless if you have planetary energy on the angles or not, the angles are still a very important part in any astrology chart. Because they're yourself, your sense of others, your relationships, your eminence, and your private life. Those are the 4 key questions that people have about their lives when they come to an astrologer or diviner. But having mutable energy on the angles just gives you a lot of mutable flow, a lot of, like, just, like, you go with the flow. It just is a flux and flow, so is life, and you're able to adapt to it. And that usually just relates a lot to queerness, because it is a lot about accepting that, like, all humans are just humans trying to have a good time.
There's a lot of complexity within that, too. Well, and, like, speaking about so fluidity specifically, too, they were talking about the water signs. So, you know, if you're, you know, emotionally, you know, in tune with different energies, you might feel more fluid with how you feel about one person versus another, like a very you know... Anyway,
the most polyamorous person I know has a Saturn Venus conjunction, not on the angle in their 11th house, but in Pisces, you know?
Yeah. So something, if you identify as queer and you have any of these, like, kind of placements within your chart, please share them with us, because we want to see, like, what else does queerness look like to you? Please let us know if you have something that we didn't bring up yet within this reading. If you are like, I actually see my queerness like this is how it shows in my chart. We want to know, because then this is something that hasn't been studied as much as other things within astrology, or, like, you know, documentation has been, you know, just dismissed or not looked at. So please help us grow the research by sharing.
Well, this is just really about nonconformity in love life in sexual relationships that you can find in a chart. So this isn't necessarily innately queer. This could just mean that you're a really kinky individual if you have a lot of these placements,
right.
you know? Maybe you're just like super strong into the BDS community, which has a very, very, very queer history, by the way. But that's besides the point.
Or it could all be subconscious as well.
Well, that would speak to like a 12th house or 8th house placement, you know? Exactly. And how that kind of ties into everything that we've been talking about, just kind of like unconventional ways of expressing your love. Or if you have like a Venus-Uranus conjunction, you know, as we were speaking to earlier.
Well, it's so interesting too to think about like also the life journey, how someone like I identified as a cis woman for, you know, a good chunk of my early adult life. And it actually like I had no idea I was trans until like literally an exact moment on April 23rd, 2022. I was like, I'm trans, what? And I was so confused, and there must have been an activation or something going on there. But just know too that, you know, people identify that can be fluid as well, like their understanding of themselves.
Yeah, my understanding of self as like a mutable sign, and with a mutable Mercury, so my processing unit is mutable, right? Is I've always felt a certain way, and then one day I'm just exposed to the definition of the exact way that I feel, and I'm like, oh, somebody put a word to it. And then that's how I get identifiers like non-binary, pansexual, kind of jazz. But it's really just queer, in a sense.
Yeah.
I'd say gender fluid is more, like, fitting, because I don't feel like anybody is stagnant. Well, everybody's also changing throughout their life and throughout their transits, and, you know, you're not the same before your Saturn return as you are after your Saturn return. And that's true to a lot of astrologers and a lot of just normal everyday humans, you know, whether they're astrologers or not, or whether they're into occultism, weird things, or if they're like a businessman doing their little businessman-y thing life. So that's another thing.
The last thing that we had as a queer marker on here was Lilith, and, you know, you talked very briefly about the story, and I know we're running a little short on time. No, we'll
just very briefly just talk about how it's just a really great indicator, a strong Lilith placement, of being just a domineering feminine energy for equal balance, for equal opportunity, for just shattering of conventional standards that femininity is associated with in a lot lot and then a negative Lilith placement is really just like if it's like conjunct Mars or harsh, squares to things. Could just be like a pick-me individual, or somebody who, you know, like the stories, it's super common, like all the time they do this trope of the bully who makes fun of the queer person but is actually queer themselves and really doesn't know how to deal with their own internal sexuality, so they take it out externally on somebody else kind of mentality. That could be a negatively placed Lilith placement. But yeah, that's just another indicator that we kind of went over very briefly, because it's asteroids are like nuances. They're not really like the oomph or impact. Exactly. And then we talked about gender affirming techniques or timing techniques for gender affirming care or gender affirming roles. And this is where you started connecting the dots to be like, oh my god, I actually like that was a 12th house perfected year or something, wasn't it?
So my third house perfection year is when I realized that I was trans. So that's when I came out to my family. That's when all of like my everyday life kind of started to change because of how I was identifying myself.
Hell yeah. One ethical consideration that I did throw in here before we get too deep into this topic is that astrology does not dictate when somebody should transition. It reflects timing that may support clarity, courage, embodiment, or visibility. Hold space without reinforcing medical gatekeeping 1,000%.
Well, and astrologers are human too, and they can miss things. They can, you know...
Oh, 1,000%. There's so many timing techniques that exist. We're going to go over briefly a couple of them. But if you have any Vedic techniques that you want to apply to a chart, any of these timing techniques could be further expanded upon in a lot of ways. The ones that I just like to focus on, or that I've seen really be as like key important factors in like queer clients specifically, is just annual perfections first and foremost. I know we've talked a lot about that, so I'll skip over it. But also lunar phases, especially secondary progressed lunar phases. Secondary progressions in general, as well as just like Mercury or Uranus transits. We were talking about Uranus earlier. And then in progressed new moons or progressed full moons. So progressed new moons will usually happen about 30 years apart from each other in your progressed lunar cycle. So like I'm a first quarter moon, so I don't get mine until like pretty close. I'm getting mine like right now, essentially. They're more about inwards rebirth, coming into new identities, expressing yourself for who you like feel like you've truly been your entire life kind of jazz, where it just really, even if you are like a new moon baby, you hit it at exactly 30. If you're like a full moon baby, you'll hit it at like 15-ish. But it's really just like an energetic shift in self-identity, on like an internalized, like physical level, as well as progressed full moons, which are really like a culmination, often with being how you're publicly seen. So if it's not like a 10th house perfected year or an 11th house perfected year, and you're coming out as trans to your community, maybe you're going through a progressed full moon, you know? As like a first quarter baby, I hit my progressed full moon before I hit my progressed new moon. I already hit my progressed full moon, but it's besides the point. There's also progressed ascendant changes too, which do happen pretty frequently, but they do signify a shift in identity. If your ascendant is shifting into a house that includes your personal planets, or in your progressed chart still has like those planets moving with it. So say your ascendant shifts into the same sign that your progressed Venus is in, and it's a year where you discover that you're polyamorous because it's in Pisces. I don't know. And you just date around and, like, do your thing and figure it out and see if you're ethically non-monogamous or if you're just a slut.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. You know, live your life, do your thing.
You are.
Yeah, but it's good to know who you are and have those kinds of, like, realizations. And then I talked about just your progressed sun hitting the ankles of big moments of stepping into visibility, often aligning with things like name changes or pronoun shifts, surgeries to be more gender affirming, hormone treatments, things like that. Just anything that's really like a change in identity on like a very impactful level, not only to you, but how you're perceived to other people as well. And then Mercury Cazimi moments I talked about too, both in transits, in progressions, things like that are always important. It's exactly conjunct the sun. When Mercury is exactly conjunct the sun, this will happen. Cazimis are just when anything is exactly conjunct specifically the sun, because the sun is our visibility point, right? Most of us are day charts because most of us live in a C-section baby world, and no doctor wants to deliver a baby at 4 a.m, you know? But it's a lot about mental clarity, self-expression, having like those internalized breakthroughs again. Maybe vocalizing those breakthroughs, like if yours was also during a Mercury Cazimi, I would wonder if there was a transit happening in that April time frame. Just to be like, oh no, because we have Mercury going retrograde in fire signs right now, so it wouldn't have been fire sign retrograding, what, in 2022? Yeah, no.
I don't think so.
I think that would have been... Yeah, I'll look into it. But anyway, yeah, it would be interesting if something like that was happening in, like, your progress chart maybe or something, just to see, like, if that was your, like, internalized, like, mental click moment. You're like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is who I am.
Yeah. Definitely. It was so sudden. So yeah, you can definitely use astrological techniques to also plan, like, oh, if you want to get top surgery or whatever, you can look at those things within charts to plan that. But the most like reliable, or not reliable, but like a helpful resource or tool would be like looking back at your patterns to then dictate like what will work for me. Also making sure you have a trans-informed, astrologer before trying to ask professionals something that they might not be equipped to do. So as fellow queer people, just be careful, like, who are you getting astrological information from too, because not everyone can be as informed with those topics. Stay safe.
And some queer-friendly platforms as resources for you to consider include the Astrology podcast, Colin over at Queer Cosmos.
We love you, Colin.
The Voluptuous Witch, the People's Oracle, or the 8th House podcast. They all have a very unapologetic queer interpretation, as well as Chaney Nicholas, who has an app, who is like super inclusive in their language. Alice Sparkly Cat's Twitter blog is super inclusive.
Please check out Alice Sparkly Cat's Twitter. I could literally spend hours just...
Or Twitter, sorry.
Literally. Or,
I said Tumblr.
It is Tumblr.
It is
It's
Tumblr.
not Twitter. Fuck that place.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure they left as soon as it became X.
No. Tumblr is
superior.
Yes.
And then some book recommendations. I'm going to throw them up on screen real quick. But for a deeper dive into queer theory and astrology, I've got like 4 little book recommendations for you, and our Alice Sparkly Cat has written one of them. So highly, highly recommend them as an individual. They're fan-fucking-tastic. And then
yeah, thank you for supporting our queer podcast. We are both obviously queer, so
yeah,
you are literally already engaging in queer astrology, so thank you for that.
Yeah, and you can also book with your local queers supportive astrologers as well, who are ethically trained to be chill about all this.
Yes, definitely. So, without further ado, please come find us more at Merc Astropod on Instagram. You can obviously leave a comment here. We would love to hear about your experiences and any other, aspects that you want to talk about queerness and astrology that we weren't able to touch on yet. We want to learn from you as well. So please help us build our community by sharing your voice. It's so important.
Yeah. And you can head over to our Instagram for updates more about the topics that we'll be discussing for our podcast, as well as you can just hit us up through there as well, through DMs, through comments, interact. We often do a lot of story posts too, to talk about different events that are happening or just different things in the community that are going on.
We both agreed that we're upping our Instagram game, so we're going to be adding our presentation slides also there. So if you want a resource to just scroll through what we've been doing, that is great.
We'll have a third mouth to feed here soon.
Announcement! We've got Zane coming into the picture.
Oh, I wasn't going to announce anything officially, but it's fine. It's
My
fine.
bad.
I was going to be like, oh, it's a mystery person, but I mentioned him 4 times on this fucking podcast
it's
so far.
so interesting. We also have another surprise astrology panel though coming up in August, which that is a little more exclusive. You will have to see who will be on that.
Yeah, no, that is going to be exciting. I am super pumped for that because we had an Ask a Professional Astrologer panel a couple of years ago.
That's how I met Rosalie.
Yeah,
that was our first meeting, which had a very interesting story.
But it had a huge turnout, and I feel like a lot of people got a lot from it, whether to just talk about how ethics work in an astrology reading or what you can and cannot say, versus, not really can and cannot, what you should and should not say. It's mostly...
for your personal style and your discretion, your kind of astrology is different than how I show up in client readings. So what would be appropriate for you might not be appropriate for me.
1,000%.
But that's up to you to decide, and you'll get more of an idea of how you want to build your service with this meetup that we're doing.
No, 1,000%. But even also if you just have a astrology question that you want to ask a room full of professionals about.
Literally.
It doesn't have to be about giving readings or being a client or XYZ. It could literally just be an astrology question, because then you get a whole panel of people who express and learn astrology in a whole bunch of different ways.
And if you're not an astrologer in the Denver area, you're also welcome to leave a comment or reach out to us and ask there, and then we can bring that up and ask that question for you on your behalf and bring that to the next podcast meeting so you can get your question answered.
And if you are local, you can hit us up on the meetup page, which is, meetup.com/Denver Astrology Group. Mm-hmm. Probably.
We'll link that. I'm sure that's linked in the show notes.
Awesome, because Bren's amazing and does all of that jazz. And then I'm going to get better about listening to my own voice on recording, because these really only take 2 hours to edit, and I put them off for a month.
It's okay. You're going with the flow. There's a lot of change in the air. So, again, if you want to book with us, we also individually do client readings. So I'm a professional tarot reader, astrologer, all that jazz, and pole dancer. So if you want to reach out to me, you can go to my Linktree/Bren Biggs or my Instagram. Actually, I have a new Instagram. I'm gonna just drop it really quick. Fortune of the Fool. So at Fortune of the Fool, that's my new project. I also just opened a YouTube too. I'm going to be sharing some awesome information there. So if that interests you, please check it out, support us. And if you want to book a reading with me, I'm very much an intuitive astrologer. So if you want more intuitive, soul searching kind of answers, things like that, I'm so happy to help you. And then we also have the fabulous Rosalie who does readings.
Technical as fuck. AstroRosalie.com. You can find me there.
Yeah.
I'm just really, I will break it down and be like, well, this is what the old ancient dude said, and this is why it works the way that it works. You can take it or leave it. If you don't like it, blame me, the interpreter. Don't blame the stars. They're always right,
That's so funny.
That's actually one of my disclaimers. It's on the wall.
I love that. Well, thank you all for joining
us. Yes. We'll see you guys next time. And
happy Pride.
Hell yeah.
Bye.
Be queer, be fun, have a good life.
Yes. Bye.